Lions. Jack's going to talk about all fundamental stuff. So if you're looking for a lot of schemes here, you're going to have to get these son of a guns and pull them outside, and they'll give you some of the schemes. I believe this stuff is a little more important. The X's and O's take care of themselves. I really believe that. The X's and O's will take, you can have all the fancy X's and O's you want, like Paul was saying when Paul first started this. But if they got great technique, you can run 4 plays and beat the shit out of somebody. You know what I mean? That's all you need. Okay? Hey, here's Jack Henry, the Detroit Lions. You put that there? Well, take Kent Stevenson, and you can knock it off your belt 3 times, and that's it.
Where's this well, yeah. Am I going to be able to get those on there? Well,
What the hell? Don't wear glasses.
shit, I can't see then.
Don't get old.
I got old. Hope I get a chance to get older. Stay in this like I won't. I appreciate it, Bob. Everybody here? I got this on right? Okay. Just a couple things, and I want to do what Mike did. I want to kind of acknowledge the people in my past. I spoke at this clinic, actually, I think it was 10 years ago. I think it was 10 years ago, in 1989. I was coaching the quarterbacks at that time. That's when Jimmy had the clinic, and I come over and spoke. I was coaching the quarterbacks. And I coached the quarterbacks for about 5 or 6 years. And one thing I can tell you, most of you are line coaches, obviously, if you're here. One of the things I can tell you is if you ever have a chance to coach the quarterback, go do that and get the hell away from what you're doing right now. Because if you're coaching the quarterback, you're never wrong. Okay, the line coach is wrong. Okay, so you all know that, but I'm going to tell you, I coached the quarterback for about 6 years, and I left the field with a whole lot less headaches than I leave it, and Sunday included, than I leave it with now. Mike mentioned some of the people in his background, and like most guys with any age, I'm 53 years old, been coaching for about close 30 years. Maybe it is 30, I kind of lost track, but I've had some people that have been a tremendous influence on me, and I'm a composite of them. Okay, I'm me, and one of the things I did at a very early age is when I was a graduate assistant one time, I worked for a guy that said, get you a guy and learn from him, and get you a position and learn the position, and because of that, you'll develop marketability. Well, Bob mentioned I've coached at probably most every college in this country, plus I guess it's 3 pro teams now. And I don't know if that's exactly what this guy had in mind when he said marketability, but, you know, I've kind of been able to always keep my family in groceries. All right. The guys that I went to when I was a young guy, and one of them is not here, but Larry Bechtel was a guy that was a tremendous influence on me as a young coach. He's not that much older than me. He just happened to be in higher level positions at that time. And I kind of chased him around the countryside to learn about run blocking. Okay, he taught me an awful lot about the running game. And I actually, part of the language that we use at Detroit, that I'm not going to use today per se, but part of the language we use at Detroit, which came with us from San Diego, is his stuff from when he was at San Diego. So I was real familiar with it because I had actually done the technique part of it myself. The language was different, but I'd done that. And Larry was very, very good to me. Even when I was at Wake Forest in the mid-'80s, I went down to Atlanta. He was coaching in Atlanta at that time. I went down to training camp down there and spent time. He was kind of my run game guru for a long time. Okay, and then Jimmy McNally has been more than a friend to me over the years. He's a guy that's taught me a tremendous amount about pass protection and running game, but particularly pass protection, because when Jimmy first came into the league in 1981, I think that's right, Jim, it was 80 or 81, the year after that, I went to where he had been, which was Wake Forest. And I've known Jimmy since about 1974. Tom Herman, who had been a GA to me at Edinburgh, had become Jimmy's GA down at Marshall, and so Jimmy and I started to talk and so on. But he has taught me a tremendous amount. Now, he's a whole lot smarter than I am. I can't keep up with him. I mean, usually he comes back around to where I'm at. You know, after about 5 years, he's changed things, and he's back to where I was to begin with. But he has had a tremendous influence on me in terms of, my knowledge and the things I do and so forth. And you're going to hear some of the language that I know you've heard from him from time to time. I had the opportunity in 1990 to work for Chuck Noll in Pittsburgh, who might be the brightest individual I've ever been around in my life. And I'm talking about not about one specific thing, but in terms of the versatility of what the man brought to every position and to the game of football. And he was so bright that he talked oftentimes about things that I kind of knew because I was, as an academic student in high school, not a particularly good one, but I had taken physics and things. But Chuck could explain everything in those terms. He could talk about force and just the different things, force of an object and so forth that, made tremendous sense if you took them into the academic area. And so I learned a lot from him because when I was hired by the Steelers, actually I was coaching a quarterback. Ron Blackledge was the line coach. He had some physical problems. I went to training camp in Pittsburgh the night before the players came in. And I had absolutely no idea what the hell I was doing when I got there because I'd been coaching quarterbacks for 5 years, and I was coaching all of a sudden in the National Football League. And Chuck was with me every hour of every day that he and I were awake for the first 6 weeks I was there. And you talk about a clinic and an experience, I got a clinic and an experience from that man that few people in their life are fortunate enough to get. He was not only a very bright and astute and knowledgeable guy, he's one of the finest teachers I've ever known because he could teach me, for starters. And he could take those concepts and those things that were very important from things we as coaches very seldom even give any thought to. And he could put them in very simple terms, which you could then instruct other people with. So he's a guy that I obviously have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for and owe a great deal to. Another guy that I'll mention that I have never spent the time with that I spent with those three people, but really did a tremendous job for me and something that I'm still using today. In 1993, I was coaching at the University of Pittsburgh, and I visited the Seattle Seahawks, and Hard Mudd was out there. And he spent 4 days with me, just me, and I learned more about slide protection from Hard Mudd in 4 days than I had learned my previous, at that point, probably 22 or 23 years in coaching. And again, some of you know Hard, probably all of you don't know him. He's a very bright individual who is sometimes way out there with me. I mean, I can't even follow him sometimes. But he was able to take me and instruct me over that 4-day period of time to the point that what I do with those kinds of protections right now is exactly what he taught me to do out there. So, and I didn't spend the time with him that I did with the previous three, but I thought his contribution to my basic knowledge and my development as a coach, I owe him a debt of gratitude as well. I've been fortunate in some respects, I guess, in that I've had the opportunity to coach at a lot of different places. I started out in high school football. I've coached Division II, I've coached Division I AA, I've coached Division I, and I've coached in the NFL. And in the college years, particularly in Division I football, I was never at Michigan or Ohio State or Alabama or Tennessee or Florida. I coached at places where you had to really teach because you weren't going to have, and that's not to say you don't teach at those places, but you had to figure out a way to get things done. I mean, you think about coaching at North Carolina and you think about coaching at Wake Forest, and there's a little difference there. So on one hand, I mean, I would have loved to have had the opportunity to have been at those places and to have had some of the better athletes, and I would have coached them just as the coaches that are there do, as hard as I could have. But I think sometimes I was fortunate in the fact that I had to be innovative, and I had to be creative, and I had to figure out ways to do things because of some of the places that I coached at in college football. I work for a guy now that's a workaholic. He's a wonderful human being. I would trust him with anything I have in my life. We meet on it. He's the most thorough individual I've ever been around. I'm speaking obviously of Bobby Ross. And he gave me the opportunity to get back into the National Football League and brought me with him from San Diego to Detroit. And I've been very, very fortunate to be around him because he's He's a hard work, no-nonsense guy. I wish he'd enjoy life a little bit more sometimes, but that's the way he enjoys it. It's not necessarily my enjoyment to work 24 hours a day, but that's kind of the way he is. But he has brought a certain amount of preparation and thoroughness, and certainly, without question, trustworthiness that isn't always apparent in this league, in the National Football League, or probably throughout the course of our profession, unfortunately. Because some guys will sell you out for a sandwich, and Bobby wouldn't sell you out for anything. Okay, with that said, what I'm going to do, I coach schemes like everybody else does, and I've really enjoyed the talks today. I'm a technician. I've always prided myself in that, and it kind of goes back to my background, as I stated, in terms of some of the colleges that I coached at, in terms of trying to figure out ways to do things. I am a composite of those people which I mentioned. Okay, I don't do everything the way Jimmy McNally does it. Okay, I don't do everything the way Larry Bechtel does it. I do some things the way Chuck Noll taught me to do them. Okay, but I am me. I do things the way I am comfortable with and the way my head coach wants to see them done. I don't even do everything exactly the way I would like to do it today. Okay? Because there's some things he wants done his way, and his name has head in front of it. So I do them, I make my points. Okay? I'm prepared if I'm asked a question with an answer. Okay? But I don't have diarrhea of the lip. Okay? I'm not afraid to try to do it another person's way, as long as it's not completely opposite my philosophy. And particularly when it's the head coach, I'm going to do it that way. Okay? I'm not going to say this is the only way to do it. So, and the reason I preface my remarks with that is, I'm going to go through the way I do things. Okay? I'm going to go through how I teach things, how I organize things, the drills I use to get those things done, and so forth. In no way, shape, or form are they the only way. Okay? And I don't pretend they are. They're just what's right for me. And they're right for me in my circumstances right now, and they've been right for me. Obviously, when Bobby hired me, I've already mentioned to you how he is. I mean, I was with the guy for almost 14 hours. I've never had an interview, only one other interview have I ever had even close to that, and that was with Chuck Noll in 1984 when he didn't hire me. Okay, but when I interviewed with Bobby in 1996, I've never been through an interview like that. Okay, so he obviously liked a lot of the things that I had to say, but yet there are still certain things that we do his way because he's the head coach and that's the way he wants them done. Okay, what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about skills. Can everybody see that? Is that focused enough in the back? Okay, I assume that it is. I'm going to talk about fundamental skills as being the building blocks of the offensive line play, and I'm going to start with the stance, okay, because I think that's where it all starts, okay? And I don't, that's the first thing I do. Do I coach it as much as I'd like? No. Do I spend as much time on it as I'd like? No. But I do coach it 30 seconds a day. I've commented on it in film and so on and so forth, and I think it's an area where offensive line play starts, frankly. Okay, whether it is run or whether it's the pass. Okay, to me the stance is really, in terms of what you do, that's not my problem, and what I do is not your problem. I think what you have to do is, the first thing you got to analyze is, what do we do? What are we going to do? What is the scheme that we're using? Okay, are we a running team? Are we a passing team? Are we a team that does both? Now, we threw the ball. We got the greatest running back in the history of the National Football League, arguably to some people, I guess, but we throw the ball 60% of the time. Okay, so I've got to have a stance that I can do both from. Okay, if we ran the ball, if we were the Pittsburgh Steelers, okay, I'm talking about my era, I'm not talking necessarily about Kent's, because I don't know what their percentages are, but if we were the Pittsburgh Steelers when I was there, I would probably have a little more weight forward in my stance than what I do right now. But we're a team in Detroit, we throw the ball, and the National Football League has obviously evolved too. It's become basketball on grass in some cases. Okay, we're not that, but we'd got run out of town sooner than we might if we were with the running back we got. But to me, the important parts, the first thing about the stance is you got to analyze what am I going to do from this stance? Do I need to be balanced? Do I need to be those things? For us, our stance needs to be efficient, and that is the key word, efficient. Is it perfect for the running game? No. Is it perfect for the passing game? No. It's efficient, which means we can do most of the actions that we do from it relatively well. Okay? It's a high efficiency type stance. It is balanced. I will tell you that. It needs to be efficient for us for both the run and the pass. Okay? And so we will get into a pretty balanced stance because we are going to do both of those things from the particular stance. My guys have to be able to pull. They got to be able to zone block. They got to be able to man block. They got to be able to dual read at guard. They got to be able to slide down the line of scrimmage. They got to be able to do all those things from the stance that I put them in. Okay? On the other hand, I got Jeff Hardings at 6'3" at right guard, and I got Ray Roberts at 6'7" at left tackle. Okay, so are they all going to look exactly alike? No. Okay, no. I'm going to put them in a stance that is efficient for what we do and what their body allows them to do. If I tried to put Ray Roberts, who's cut from here down, legs, in the same stance to Jeff Hardings, who has the same body type that I have, if I tried to put him in the same stance, I'd be beating my head against the wall. Okay, so again, as I work with them, I give them some guidelines, I give them some starting points, and then I work with them to develop the stance that is efficient for them, okay, for that particular player. Do my guys all look like clones? No. Okay, no. They don't all look like clones because they are all different. Now, there are some basic principles that are similar, but do they all look exactly the same? No. Okay? And that's the reason why, because they have to be efficient. They're the guy that's got to do all those things that I mentioned before. Okay, now when I do the stance, when I teach it to them, and when I tell them to put it in their brain so that they can mentally check it, I teach it from the ground up. I've done this, probably since I was coached in college. I do it from the ground up. I start with the feet and I go to the head. Okay, and I've mentioned some of the things there in terms of the feet. We're a toes straight ahead or slightly out offensive line is the way our feet are. We start with the ankle bend and the knee bend. I want the knees bent. I want very little air between the creases of the knees. I want the hips closed. And I'll get into this in a little bit in terms of hitting people and in terms of force. Okay, I want the hips closed. I want their back relatively flat. Okay, when I say relatively, I would like them to be as straight backed as possible. Okay, I would like them to be as straight backed as possible. Now, if it's a short yardage or goal line play or something like that, that's a different situation. I would like the butt fairly straight across. Okay, I tell them what to do with their two arms. The offside arm, they will rest the fat of the elbow, or fat of the forearm on the point of that knee. Because, as Mike mentioned, in terms of quick hands, I want them to be able to get their hands up quickly. The other hand, obviously, we're going to put it on the ground if we're in a three-point stance. Okay? And I'm going to form a tripod with those three fingers and the thumb and the little finger to place the hand upon. I don't put a lot of weight on the down hand because, again, as I said, it's a balanced stance. I want their levers cocked, if you would. That's a Chuck Nollism. Okay, I want their knees and their hips cocked and ready to explode. Okay, so that's just some of the things. I want the neck up but not bulled. I don't want them to get stiff-necked at the line of scrimmage. I want them to have peripheral vision. I want them to see what's happening not only in front of them at the line of scrimmage and at depth, but I want them to be able to see what's going on beside them. Okay, now sometimes, like every center in the league, you'll see our guy, he's up like this, he's looking around. That's a different scenario because the center's got to be able to see sometimes way detached from him. Okay, and then I've already mentioned the head. I want them to look and periph things in terms of in front of them and to the sides of them. Okay, so that's where we start from with the stance. Okay, the center stance is only slightly different. Okay, I didn't really talk about stagger or anything in terms of the feet, but I take a little less stagger with the center stance. We try to be almost parallel-footed. Okay, we put the ball in front of the right eye. We put, depending on the size of the center's hands, his thumb between the second and third lace on the ball. Okay, when we bring the ball up, we do it, and most of you guys, younger guys in particular, won't even know what the hell a start-up lawnmower is. But one of the things, you're used to pushing the button and it starts up. You used to have to pull a cord on a lawnmower, and you got over and you did that. That's the action I want the center to have as he brings the ball up to the quarterback. There's a natural quarter turn of the ball as it comes up, and the quarterback then should get the laces across this part of his hand, which means he can go do this and do that right away. Okay, so the center stance is slightly different in terms of the foot part of it. Okay, in terms of the balance of the foot, I have even less stagger with him than what I will do with some of the other people. Generally speaking, with the guards and tackles, I'm toe heel or toe instep or toe heel. Okay, and I'd really prefer them all to be toe instep, to tell you the truth. But you know, Ray Roberts ain't getting in that stance. I mean, I could take him out there and practice from now till next fall, and that isn't happening. His legs are too long. Okay. All right, so that's the stance, and that's where I start everything from. We had our mini camp like most of the NFL teams in April, and I spent a fair amount of pre-practice time working on the stance. Okay, I make them get out there early like most coaches do, and when I work, I don't wear them out there normally. Okay, but I'm going to work on a stance, and I'm going to work on maybe a set on a particular day or a footwork or whatever. But I'm going to get my 30 seconds to a minimum a minute a day on them coaching the stance. Now, as time goes on, obviously, I'm like everybody else. I'm into schemes and so forth. As you get into game plan and so forth, I don't spend as much time. I'd be lying to you if I told you I did. But I will tell you this: last year in the middle of the year, Ray Roberts came to me. He was struggling in the middle of the year. He was having some back problems, and he came and he said, "Jack, how about checking my stance out today?" Okay, so at least I feel like I've convinced them that that's an important part of it. And I think, obviously, it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference what the hell I think. It's what they think that is most important, because they're the guys that go out and play. Okay, in terms of the next thing that I'll do with our particular scheme is I will look at the individual blocks that we got to master. Okay, and what I'll do here is I'm going to talk a little bit about my teaching thought process on those, and then I'm going to show you I'm going to talk to you about how I drill those things. And I don't have all the drill tape that Mike had to show you, but I'm going to try to talk you through those. I've tried to spend some time on the acetates and so forth so that I can hopefully be descriptive with you on those things. The very first, the core blocking, I teach a lot of different techniques. I do. I know that. But the core block that we have in our whole scheme is the drive block, and it is a hands block. We don't always use our hands. Okay, but if we're going to try to create power movement on a guy, okay, with a single block, more often than not, with a single man on it, more often than not, it's going to be what we call our drive block. Okay, now when I teach the drive block, it is a hands block. I've already mentioned this. One of the things that's really, really important to me goes back to stance. Okay, back in it was one of those times I was through here when Jimmy was here with Forrest Gregg. I was scared to death of Forrest Gregg. When I was a college football player, Forrest Gregg was in his heyday with the Green Bay Packers. And he was so good and so tough and everything. I mean, I was totally like in awe of this guy. And I come in here to visit something, and it's when the hands rules had just been liberalized. And I come in here, and everybody was talking about hands, and I'd been visiting the Redskins a lot at that time, Joe Bugle and so forth. And I come in here, and where's Jimmy McNally at? That damn Jimmy McNally gets me in an office in Spinney Field, which we were at last night. He gets me in an office in there, and he's got me demonstrating the drive block on Forrest Gregg. Now, you talk about a guy about to pee down his leg, it's me. I just walked out of his office. There's this guy, Vince Lombardi, who was one of my heroes in coaching when I first started. There's this plaque on Forrest Gregg's wall from when he was inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame that says, quote, Vince Lombardi, quite frankly, the toughest guy I've ever known in my life or ever coached. and he's got me in a little office with him demonstrating the drive block on him, and I mean, he was trying to help me. I think he was trying to get me a job in the NFL, but I was scared to death. Okay? One of the things that, to me, that really became, when people started to liberalize use of the hands, it became, because I had never been instructed that way as a college player, because you weren't allowed to use your hands at that time and during the early parts of my career. But one of the things that just jumped at me, and I already mentioned it, I mean, the Redskins had great success when Joe was there. Hell, they won 4 Super Bowls. But it just seemed to me like everybody was blocking guys with their hands in their chest. You know, everybody was coming off the ball and doing this. And that was, I never, you know, I never quite got into that. Okay, to me, and you know, and then in 1990, I went to work for Chuck Nolan. He's still talking about hitting people with the tops of the pads, which means you're here. So that has been a sticking point for me over the years in terms of this particular approach. I'm really adamant with my guys about, and I'm going back to stance is what I'm doing, about keeping their levers cocked until they actually explode into the contact. About keeping the flat back and about keeping the bend in the knees and so forth because, again, because of my background. Okay, and where I came from and so on and so forth in terms of that use of the hands. Now, when I teach the drive block, I teach it in 4 different segments. I teach the approach, which is how I'm getting from where I'm at right now to Bob Wiley, who I'm trying to block. That's the approach part of the block. Now, if I'm over here, I've got a different approach than if I'm right here. Okay, but I've got an approach. Okay, and I have on the drive block guys in different alignments on me, and I may step with this foot or that foot or whatever, but I've got an approach. Okay, and that is the first thing that as I break things down, and one of the things I'll mention as I get into the drill, I try to do everything in progressions. Okay, the stance that I've already mentioned about, I will teach the first 2 steps, which is essentially the approach part of the drive block. Okay? And what, in its simplest terms, what it is trying to get from where you're at to where the defender's at. Okay, that's the first thing that I will teach. On every drive block that I have, I will give them a landmark. Now, in the NFL, the landmark I give them is based on where they're going to put their hat. If you're in college football, you probably can't say that. It hadn't been that long ago I coached in college football, but you're not allowed to even mention that, I don't think. If I remember back when I was at Pitt, what I was saying at that time was, all I want you to do is make sure you get your eyes on the landmark. Okay, well, duh. Obviously, if your eyes are on there, your headgear's on there as well. Okay, so I will give them a landmark. It may be a play side number. It may be an inside number. It may be down the middle. It may be a play side knee, whatever it's going to be. It's not going to be a play side knee, but it's going to be one of those 3 things, a play side number, down the middle, inside number. Okay, is the landmark. So I will always give them a landmark on a play as I go through it. And as I drill it, okay, when I approach a guy and I work with a guy on this thing, as I drill it, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but if I've got a guy here, I will drill a guy hitting an outside landmark with the guy there, hitting an outside landmark with the guy there, and we don't really do it with the drive block, but I will work with the shoulder technique, hitting a play side number there. So I'll work those different combinations with them in terms of hitting a landmark, but I'm always going to give them a landmark. Okay, the contact phase of the block is where the force meets the force of the defender. Okay, and again, I'm going to go back to, I'm old school, I know that, but I'm going to go back to the fact that we're going to have our levers cocked, we're going to have good knee bend, we're going to have our hips closed, and we're going to strike the guy with 3 parts of our body. Okay, our knees, our hips, and in this case, because it's a drive block, our hands. Okay, that's going to be a 3-part action, and if we don't hit them with 1/3 of that, we've lost 1/3 of our hitting power. And in my opinion, football, particularly in offensive line play, is a game of, over the course of the game, imposing your will upon your opponent to where he says, uncle. And you don't do that in the National Football League in a quarter. You don't do it in 2 quarters. Okay, it's somewhere in the late third quarter or sometimes in the last 2 minutes of the game that you impose your will upon your opponent. Now in college football, sometimes there's such an imbalance between the two teams that isn't necessarily the case. Okay, but when you play the team that is as good as you are, okay, or you're the team that's not as good, over the course of the game to have any chance of winning, I believe you have to out-hit and impose your will upon your opponent. You make him say uncle eventually. Okay? You do that by winning the battle of the hitting. Okay, so it's very, very important to me to coach this contact phase. I know the most efficient way to get all three parts of the hitting involved are to have your levers cocked. Your knees, your hips, and whatever you're striking with the upper hand, which in the case of the drive block is the hands. Fast hands, I think Mike used that term. Quick hands. Okay? I think that's very important. But I don't want to be quick-handed at the expense of losing my hitting power in my hips or in my knees. Now, I want to make it a physical hitting game. Okay, follow through is what you do after you've hit the guy. Okay, I am a toes slightly out guy. I want balance. The very drills that Mike had on the tape from last time are the same things I do in terms of I want my guys to have their weight in the middle. And they're going to turn their toes out ever so slightly. Now that's one way I've changed because I used to be a balls of the feet guy years and years ago. But I think it's better for balance if your toes are out slightly and you keep your weight on your insteps. Okay, and we're going to run at those kind of courses, the same kind of angles he took, the same kind of body mechanics, and so on and so forth, to get the finish part, or the follow-through part of the block. Okay, now one of the things that Jimmy used to always talk about was, he said, if you get behind a car and you push it, okay, you don't chop your feet. Okay, well, when you're trying to drive block some of the guys we have in our league or some of the guys you have in your, that's true too. What you do is you hit that thing and then you push like you're pushing a car. Okay? And eventually as the car starts rolling backward, your feet become shorter and shorter as you try to gather up on the guy. But you don't start out by doing this. Okay? Now again, this is my opinion. Okay? And as Mike said, I'm up here now so I can voice my opinion. Okay? It's not this and this, it's more this and this. My point of emphasis is to drive my knees into the defender's knees. Drive the point of my knees into his knees. Okay? As I'm doing the follow-through part of the block. Okay? Now the finish to me is of all the things that are really critical, Bob mentioned we had a back run for 2,000 yards 2 years ago, and obviously he's a great back. He'd never run for 2,000 yards before, though. Okay, in all his career years in the NFL, he had never rushed for 2,000 yards, nor had anybody else other than two guys. Now, another guy did it this past year. But in the history of the NFL, there's only been 4 guys to go over 2,000 yards. Okay, the difference was not what I was doing or what I was teaching, because I'm teaching the same stuff. The difference was 2 years ago, Barry rushed for 1,500 yards. That's a pretty good year for most guys. For him, that's average. Okay? This past year, we didn't finish like we finished the year before. And that's, I don't know if that's a reflection on it. It obviously always becomes a reflection on the coach. But it sure is that you better understand that my players understand that I'm upset with the way we finished things last year. Because we didn't have the same sense of urgency. Barry did not average 5.5 yards a carry last year. Okay, he averaged 6.2 the year before. He didn't average 5.5. And for him to be really having a humming season, he's got to average 5.5 yards a carry. Everybody talks about 4 yards a carry, this 4.5 yards a carry, whatever. Barry Sanders loses more yardage on first down than any back in the history of the league. But he also breaks more long runs. Well, last year, we didn't finish downfield, not just my guys. 2 years ago, I spoke at Jimmy's clinic down in Wilkes-Barre, and I went out and I talked about our wide receivers were the best blocking wide receivers in the National Football League. They weren't as good last year. Okay, we'd get him in the open, and we didn't get him the distance. Okay, and that comes down to me to something that is not. That's something that I do some drills for. I talk about it all the time. I emphasize, but that comes from here. Okay, that comes from there. Okay, and you got to have guys that understand that and have that same kind of urgency to get that done. Now you can bet that I have cut out every long run from 2 years ago, and I have it on tape, and they've seen it. And I've also cut out some of the runs from this past year that were 6-yard gains, which is pretty good, but didn't go for 60. I mean, we had a play 2 years ago in Minnesota at our place that we didn't hardly block anybody. And Barry started off the weak side to the right, and we didn't block it real good over there. We kind of had a hat on a hat. And they did something on the backside, whatever. He stopped right there and cut it back over there, took it right behind the center. And when he took it behind the center, Kevin Glover took the nose tackle and just kind of pushed him. And the left guard come over, and the linebacker had overflowed the thing off the top, and he didn't stop. Mike Compton kind of got to here, and he did this. Well, Barry hit that damn crease and went down to about the 2-yard line. We didn't do that last year. Okay, we didn't have the same urgency. We didn't have the same hunger. Okay, I don't know as a coach if you can create that. All you can do is stress it, and you can talk about it, and you can show it. But I think that's got to come from within here. But you can bet it's something that I always talk about. And I have a couple drills. I don't do them often. I do them once in a while in training camp. When we have a little more practice time, I have a couple things I do. But I think that's absolutely critical. Okay. Okay, that's our base block, and that's the progression in terms of how I teach it. Okay, and then the next thing we will do is we will go to, okay, I will teach shoulder blocks. Okay, now you could hardly work for Chuck Noll and not have a background in teaching shoulder blocks. I mean, Chuck Noll is one of the greatest trap scheme guys in the history of the National Football League, and that's not really in vogue right now. But his principles about same foot, same shoulder, I defy anybody to pick up a football film and see a guy that doesn't win the force contest because he hit a guy like that. Same foot, same shoulder, as opposed to he hit him like this. You look at your tape, you look at your film, when a guy hits a guy like that foot and that shoulder, he develops more force than a guy that hits a guy like this. Okay? So that is the principle under which I work. Same foot, same shoulder. Now, I had visited the Steeler camp for I'm a Pittsburgh guy, by the way, Mike. We're not all assholes. I had visited the Steeler camp for years. Okay, and I could never even remember this. I knew what he was talking about until I went to work for him, and then I figured I'd better, because I'd say, I can't even remember what I used to say, but I could never say same foot, same shoulder. It always came out some other way. Same shoulder, same knee or something. I don't know, but I could never get it right. But when I went to work for him, I figured I better get it right. And that is a principle which I think is very, very important. So I teach, because I have certain amount of blocks that are involved with shoulder blocks, I teach that principle. I coach the hell out of that on film, and I sell them on it every time it comes up. Anytime we trap a guy, anytime we might stack block on the backside that we're using the shoulder, sometimes we hand check it as he did, as I call it a hand check. Sometimes we use the shoulder on it, depending on who we're playing and what they do and the type of play we're running. Okay, we will sometimes use a shoulder, or whether they're a grab team, we'll sometimes use a shoulder on it. And I will show it to them where they win the battle of the hitting because they've used same foot, same shoulder. I will also show them when they haven't won it. In other words, they've gotten knocked back 3 inches. Now, you don't blow people up in the National Football League very often. I mean, if you can get 3 to 6 inches of movement, you've done a hell of a job. There are very few of those blocks like you would get in college football sometimes where you have, a physical mismatch maybe. I mean, that just doesn't happen. The players are too good, and, they're getting paid. They know if they get their ass knocked out of there, the next week somebody else is going to be there. Or maybe not the next week, but they're not going to be around long. So it's too competitive and too close. So you don't get that kind of movement, but you get the kind of movement that you need to create creases. Okay, now I teach, in terms of the shoulder blocks, where I use those, I use them in man schemes. We've not been a big man scheme team. Okay, we've not been a big man scheme team. Pittsburgh's done an excellent job with it. Mike's had some things in their offense there over the past few years, or this past year in particular, that were really good adaptations to personnel and to their scheme. We're going to do some of those things, okay? And we have done some of them in the past. We just haven't been doing them. Okay, now, when I'm talking about the man schemes, I teach two of these things very hard. We do very little trapping. We do a little bit of it. Chris was talking about block backs, okay? One of the things I try, and maybe I give them too much, I don't know, but one of the things I will do is I will look at, as everybody does, I'll look at the tape and see how they play the block back, or how they play the down block. Okay, as an example, I'll give you a perfect example. We will use sometimes a near shoulder block, which means if I'm blocking back or I'm blocking down, I'm going to use this shoulder, and I'm going to deliver my blow from here down the same way I do with the hands, but I'm going to use a flipper, as Mike called it. I'm going to use that on that block. And we don't necessarily worry about creating great movement either, but we would like a little bit of down the line movement and so forth. If a guy is a penetrator, I'm going to use a far shoulder. I'm going to put my head across the front of it. Now, one of the things I have, my job, I feel, is to find out which of the two we need to use during the course of the week based on who we're playing against. Now, is it perfect? No. The example I was going to give you was 2 years ago we went to play Minnesota. Okay? And every time I saw Jerry Ball play the block back with the down block by the guard, he spun out on it. So I said, that's easy, we'll use a near shoulder on the guy and put our head behind him and take care of the roll across the top. First time we did it, Jeff Hardings tries to do that. The son of a bitch blew up the field and hit Barry in the backfield. Okay, now everybody's irate with me. Okay, the head coach is irate with me. The offensive coordinator is irate with me. Jeff Hardings is irate with me. I mean, I don't know what the hell else to say. Every time I ever saw it, that's what he did. Okay, now the next time we come to the sideline, Jeff's over there and he's, what the hell, I did what you said to do, and, now everybody's yelling at me and so on and so forth. I said, okay, far shoulder him because he's seen us. I mean, they see us twice a year. That's what so we far shoulder the guy. Guess what he does? What he'd been doing all along, spun out. So he's over there making a play for a 3-yard gain. So I don't think you're going to be 100% correct on it. Okay, I think you delude yourself if you think you are. And I think you have to, I know I do. If I screw it up one time, shit, we'll, line up and run the next play. That's what we got second down for. Okay, now my head coach doesn't like to hear that, but that's the way I feel about it. I will teach both a near shoulder and a far shoulder, though. I'll teach the approach on that, okay, because the approach is a little bit different. I'll teach the contact phase of it. I'll teach the follow-through part of it, and obviously I'll stress the finish part of it. Okay? The reverse shoulder I hardly ever use because we don't do enough far shoulder, to be very honest with you, that people get to biting on the far shoulder technique. Okay, now the best team in our league at that is San Francisco. They do a great job with their tight ends blocking down on 5 techniques and then reverse shouldering them and getting their ass to the goal line they're going to. They do a great job with it. Okay, my guys, Hardings will do it on occasion. Mike Compton has been my left guard. He would do it on occasion. He wasn't very good at it, but he would do it on occasion. But I will teach them the reverse shoulder comes off of the far shoulder technique in terms of the landmark, in terms of the approach, and so on and so forth. I don't do a lot of it. We don't do a lot of traps, but when we were doing it, we do some traps, particularly 6-hole traps. We do some of those. And I will drill the guys. I'll show you how I drill that in terms of, again, the key point is same foot, same shoulder. Hitting the guy on the proper landmark, same foot, same shoulder. Okay? All right, now, how I take those shoulder techniques and I will tie them into zone schemes, and I've already talked about a few of these, but how I will turn those into zone schemes on our double teams, the blocks that Chris talked about today. Okay, they're a little bit flatter than what we are on our double teams. We tend to stress vertical movement on those. Again, that's what my head coach wants, so that's what I coach. It creates some problems. If you really get the kind of movement that you want, and we run a little different play than they do too, but if you get the kind of movement you want, the damn backside linebackers run through underneath on you all the time, and you can't get to him, the guy you're really going to. You can't, because you got such a big hole in there. Okay, that's my problem that I have to address, but that's the way we try to do that. But I use a shoulder technique on, I refer to them as team blocks. I have post-drive type blocks because I thought maybe that might be, in terms of what you guys would understand language-wise, would be a little more helpful. But I'm talking about if I'm double-teaming a 3 technique between a guard and a tackle, or a 5 technique between a tackle and a tight end. Okay, I'm going to use a shoulder technique with the inside blocker. Okay, I'm going to use a shoulder technique. And we two are going to step with the inside foot 98% of the time. 98% of the time, because we're going to hit the guy on the second step, and again, it's going to be a same foot, same shoulder approach. Now, if they're a serious penetrating team, okay, we may step with the outside foot against a real wide technique. Okay, and if we're wrong, we're wrong. Again, I always stress getting the second step down. But again, that's 2% of the time. We're going to most of the time step with the inside foot. One is to take away what Chris called the spike, or maybe Mike called it the spike. We're going to take away the 3 technique we call the spike, the 5 technique that goes inside we call a ram. Okay, the very first reason that I want the inside foot to hit the ground is because I want to take that away and deny penetration right away. And then the second reason is because the block normally takes place on the second step. It's a shoulder block. I want it to be same foot, same shoulder. Okay, and I will drive that step through the middle of the guy's crotch. Okay, backside blocks, Mike did a whole presentation on that. I've already mentioned, on certain plays we will use the shoulder technique. Again, if I'm the stack look that Mike called it, we don't call it that, but what he's already described to you, if I'm the left guard and I'm using that technique on our inside run play, normally depending on the alignment of the linebacker we're going to, normally what we're going to do is step with the inside foot to take away the spike and hit the guy on the second step, okay, and so on and so forth. So if it's the outside zone play or it's a toss play on the backside, we're going to do exactly what they do, which is hand check, okay, so we can get away from that guy in a hurry, okay. The points that he made to me in terms of the width of the feet are absolutely critical. You got to have a base all the time. You got to run with a base. That's one of the things I talk to my guys anytime that they're blocking a linebacker or they're coming off a down guy. Is to have a base. Another key thing that he mentioned, and a couple other guys have mentioned too, about staying on track. Don't turn back. Stay on track. Go to where the guy's going to show up, and so forth. But that again is a shoulder technique that we start with that guard. Now it's a hands technique for the tackle. It's a hands technique for the tackle, but it's a shoulder technique unless we're using the hand check I already mentioned. And both he and Chris talked about the block backs. This is another one that I look like we went through a period last year for about 3 games that we didn't block a block back right in any one of the 3, because every time we did one thing, they did something else. Okay? I'm scared to death of John Randall hitting us in the B gap, even if I bring the tackle down, and I'm scared to death of Warren Sapp hitting us in the B gap on those things to the backside. Okay, so more often than not, against teams in our division, I'm going to block back, not flat, but I'm going to block back to get my head across the front. Okay, now the near shoulder we will use against those teams that do club across or against those teams that are big TT teams. Okay, so again, we teach both types of concepts back there. Okay, and again, I'm not going to go through this because I'm not going to get through all this, but I will teach that in the same sequence. Approach, contact, follow through, and finish. In other words, if I'm using a shoulder technique, obviously if Paul Alexander's on me and I'm the right guard and he's a 3 technique, my approach I've already mentioned is this. Okay, but if I'm blocking back on him and I want to use a near shoulder technique and put my head behind him, I don't have the same footwork, so the approach is different. I'm going to go here to put my head behind. I'm going to turn my shoulders more on track, and so forth. So the approach is different based on the type of block and where it falls in those particular blocking patterns. And again, the topic that I'm speaking about is taking these fundamentals and building them into the schemes that we all use. Okay, so I'm generalizing a little bit, but that's how I would tie them in. Okay, and then finally, in terms of this particular running game thing here, we have certain zone blocking principles. Okay, we have them on the front side, we have them on the back side. I've already mentioned them on the double team. Okay, we have a couple concepts that we use on those, and I work them just like in the drills. I think I saw Chris on his drill tape had. I do the same types of things. In terms of landmarks and so forth. I can tell you this on the inside zone play. Okay, the inside zone play, which our back's landmark on that is the outside hip of the offensive tackle. That's his original point of his original landmark. Along the front on the down players, our landmark is going to be the play side number. Right? Whether it's a cutoff on the backside or whether it's a front side tackle guard combination. Our landmark is going to be the play side number. We're going to try to create some movement by building as much of a wall on the down guys on those plays as we can. Okay? And our landmark is going to be, if it's we might call it a stack, we call it a B on the backside. If we're B blocking back there, this guard, when he hits that 3 technique, he's going to hit his inside number because that's the play side number. Okay, our center's got a cocked nose on him, and we're using a true zone scheme. He's going to get his head on the play side number. He's going to use whatever approach he needs to do that. And that may mean, in the language of Jimmy and Paul and Wiles, that may mean bucket stepping. Okay, that may mean doing that. I don't use that phraseology, but that may mean what it means, because that's the approach you got to take to get on track, to get on that guy's play side number. Okay, I tell them to open their hips up enough to do that. And if the guy's tighter, you don't have to open your hips as far, and so on and so forth. But that is the landmark we'll use on that, and that is the track, that's the approach we'll use, and so on and so forth. Okay, the uncovered blocker on the inside zone play, okay, is going to step at the middle of the down defensive lineman that he's zone blocking on. He's going to step at the middle of that guy. Because again, we want to get push as much as we can. Okay? And then we're going to do exactly what Jimmy taught me, who learned from Howard, I believe, originally. I don't believe, I know. We're going to look at the linebacker in terms of whether we use one hand or two hand on the down guy. If the linebacker fast flows and goes over the top hard, we're going to go in on the down guy with two hands. We're going to stay on that track and go in on him with two hands. If he stays in the middle or he runs downhill, we're going to push with one hand on that guy and hit the linebacker now on the play side number. Okay? On the back side, you play Tampa Bay, the will linebacker half the time's in the A gap. That's already fast flow for the backside tackle. It's already fast flow for him. So he knows he's using two hands on the down guy. He has to get on track enough, lose ground, lose depth, as Kent said, that he can get his head across the front of that, because he ain't getting much help. Because if we use a shoulder against Tampa, that Brooks is running through, I promise you that, and he's hitting Barry in the backfield. So we're more this way against them. Okay? All right, so those are our landmarks. That's the way we teach that particular principle in terms of the front side, back side. I talked a little bit about the double team. On the double team, on the zone double team, the concepts I was talking about a minute ago that Chris spoke of and so forth, the first thing we are alert to is linebacker run through, or immediate threat to the gap that we are protecting. So if I'm a guard and I'm on a three technique block, I step with the inside foot, the most immediate threat is this guy spiking across my head. If I'm a five technique and it's a tackle, the most immediate threat is the five technique ramming across my head. So deny penetration in that particular gap. If I get to the second step and I hit this guy with same foot, same shoulder, the next threat comes from, if there's an adjacent defensive lineman, it comes from there. The next threat is from the closest linebacker on run-through. And so that's where we focus I make them alert to where it can come from, where the threat can come from, and then we focus our eyes in that particular gap that we're accountable for. Okay? And then we create the vertical movement that I talked about, all things being equal, and we go to the backer that ultimately we're designated to get to. But that is the zone principle as well. On those blocks, our outside blocker never, ever, ever, unless I had to show you the film and I'd say, well, they didn't do what I told them to do, comes off unless he absolutely gets forced off by the inside blocker. That does not happen a whole bunch. Short side plays on occasion where we're going to the mic, it happens. Okay, it happens on occasion because you got to get the out because the guy comes over the top faster than when it's to the tight end side. But if you're on the front side and you're going all the way to a will linebacker on the back side, most of the time, if you get that kind of that vertical movement I talked about on a 5 or a 3, that guy's going to run through underneath. And the inside blocker's got to take him. The inside blocker's got to take quick threat to that gap from either the defensive lineman or a linebacker on a run through. So I don't want that outside guy coming off and we got a guy sitting in the hole, a defensive lineman. Okay, so very, very seldom will you see the outside blocker come off. Every once in a while with the tight end, if we've gotten a good crease, whatever, and the backside backer gets up, but most of the time they run through underneath if you've gotten the kind of movement you want to get. Okay. Okay, any questions on that? That's the basic premise of what I do in terms of the particular blocks, etc. I'll take you through a few things here in terms of drills. I'm going to speed this up just a little bit because I do have the passing game to get through and so forth. I've already mentioned to you in terms of when I practice things, I do them in progressions. Okay, I take them through the steps. Now, some coaches, I remember years ago when Pitt was really good, there was a guy by the name of Don Boyce, was the line coach at Pitt, and they were really good at that time. He did none of this. Everything he did, he wanted it to be, the full thing. And I never bought into it, but he had great success with it, so it doesn't have to be this way is the point I'm making. Okay, I try to do everything in progressions. I will do the approach part of this block from the stance, start drills. That's what Mike had on tape for you. Okay? Do not forget, if you do any amount of pulling and trapping, to make sure that you get those in. Okay? That you get those into your stance and start drills in terms of angles and so forth. Okay? Now, I have boards. I don't use boards anymore either. Chuck Noll hated boards. When I was a college football coach, I was coached on boards, and so I used them a lot of my career. Okay, I used them at Wake Forest, and actually I used them at Pitt. I left the Steelers and went back to Pitt and used them again. I think it's a little bit different maybe with college guys, I don't know. But I don't use boards anymore either. Okay, I didn't use them when I was with the Steelers. I didn't use them in San Diego. But I think however you got to do the drills Mike has, I use cones. When I bring a guy out in to work him out in the off season, I'll use cones a lot of time. And what that allows me to do, particularly when I'm only working with a couple guys, it allows me to see both their feet in relationship to that particular cone. In other words, I'll set a cone over there and tell the guy I want him to approach that. Like that is the guy's outside foot. I want you to hit his outside number. Okay? Now I'll stick another cone a little bit tighter where I really want his second step to go so that I don't wind up with my feet together. Again, in reference to what Mike described. I want to run with a base. I want to be on that track. Okay? And I'll do all those different things. I'll have this that, our tackles reaching a wide 5 and a weak side lead play. And I'll do those things with them in terms of stance and starts at some point in time. I use the angles. You can use boards. I use cones. Occasionally I've used those big those Agile ones or whatever they're called, the step-over bags. I've used those and made them run that because that makes them keep a base. It's a little more cumbersome, particularly when you're doing drill work with your guys and so on and so forth. But if I've got 1 or 2 of them or 3 of them, like sometimes in February or March I'll occasionally use those. And the other thing I think you need to try to do, we all need to do, you want repetition, repetition, repetition. But some guys need a little bit of variety. I happen to be one of those guys. I can't do something the same way all the time or I get bored to tears with it. Jeff Hardings is that way. If I did the same drill with him every day, he'd go over there and have a sandwich during practice. He gets bored. Okay, so I have to come up with different ways to do the same thing with him. Those are just some of the ways I've done it over the year. The contact part of it, again, I've mentioned and I've emphasized the 3 parts of the block, which I think are absolutely critical. in terms of contact, ankle, knee contact, hip contact, and upper body contact. I've used boards and bags. I use 2 different kinds of sleds. I use that spring-loaded one that Mike had. I use a Crowther sled. I've been using the Crowther sled since I was a junior high football player. Okay, I think it's a great teaching tool. I know Gilman's here, but the Crowther sled is a great teaching tool. Okay, and I use a lot of Neil's stuff too, so I don't feel bad about that. But I use the Crowther sled. I use a progression on there. I do a 1-step progression. I do a 2-step progression. I'll use a just come off the ball progression. I'll do all those things to teach the contact phase. I don't do hit anymore. I don't know why, but I quit doing that. You know, the 6-point explosion thing. I don't do that anymore. Okay? The follow-through, the primary one that I do is I put them in the fit position. In other words, where do I want them to be whenever they've gotten, you know, the guy's there now and he's gotten to this point and he's got his head on the outside number. He's right where you want him to be. And he's like this. He's got this foot up ever so slightly. Or excuse me, he's got this foot up ever so slightly. I'm on a right-handed stance now. I've hit him on the 2nd step. I got my hat on the number, whatever. I'll fit him into that position. I'll make him, I really emphasize to him rolling over this knee. In other words, pressing that knee down and stepping with that foot. That's the other thing about same foot, same shoulder. Even though that's not a shoulder block, okay, it's so much more natural to finish a block when you're in that position and you do that than if you're like this and you're trying to get this foot going. It just doesn't work as well. It's so much better if you roll that knee down and step with that foot. Again, that's something that, even though it's a hands block on the drive block, I get from the Crowther sled because I make them do that particular movement on the Crowther sled as well. And then I'll do it against shields or against a man. I do it against a man sometimes. So I can watch that knee go down, and I'll film the knee going down and the step with the foot and so on and so forth. And then the finish, I don't do this as often as I'd like to. Guys in the National Football League, they get pissed off if you abuse them. And I don't do that. I do it once in a while. I'll do it in training camp where I'll tell them I'm going to do it. And we'll be doing a drill, and I'll tell them you go to the whistle, and I don't blow the whistle for a while. And I make them keep working the damn guy. And I tell the guy where I want him to go. And I extend the whistle on it to work on finish a little bit. Most of that I get off of film. And I don't only show our guys, I show them other teams' guys on finish. Okay. All right. And this is just as I go on with this progression of things that I do or have done. I used to think the Oklahoma drill was the stupidest drill I'd ever seen in my life. Okay? It's a defensive drill. Offensive guy can't win. All those things. And then I went to work for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's why we used to open training camp every year. It was the very first thing we did. We would take our best offensive lineman and put him on a rookie defensive line. We would take Greg Lloyd, who at that time was at the top of his game, and put him against the youngest tight end we had. Chuck would script it all. And he wanted to see who would compete. And in his jargon, who would put his face in there. Okay? So I will do this on occasion. We don't do it like we did it in Pittsburgh, but I think there is merit for the drill. Even though I'm talking about, everybody knows what I'm talking about, I assume. Where you have the 2 bags over here like this, and got a quarterback, and he hands the ball to a back, and the back runs off that block, and so on and so forth. I don't even much care about the technique, etc. in this, but I think it is a very, very important block for the reasons I just described. A drill, excuse me. And I won't do it more than once a year. But I think it's really important to find out the guys that will compete. And I think, again, I talked about that before, and our finish, I think that's important to know. I think you want to know the guys that will bleed. Okay, we do a base reach and cutoff that everybody does with 3 guys on 3 guys. We give them a play. We do this drill quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And we do this even during the course of the season where they got to hit those different landmarks. Play side number, actually it's play side number. And we work on that. I give them a play that will put them on those things, and I bring them out of a huddle, and we do it against our defensive line even during the season for about 5 minutes. Okay? And then your 2-on-1, 3-on-2 drills. You know, getting that double team and that block right there. Or, you know, reaching this guy and getting half the zone block from that guy, all those types of things. Block back, pull, so forth. We do half line, which every offensive guy I've ever been around has hated, myself included. Okay, we do half line drills because, again, I'm just trying to get different ways to get the same thing done. This involves more people. I mean, as you go along, it involves more people. 9-on-7 we all do inside drill. We call it 9-on-7 and then team, obviously. Okay? All right, that's a sequence of things that I do in a running game fundamentally, and that's how I drill them. That's the progression, basically. Anybody have any questions on anything? Okay, good. I did a great job of teaching, or I put you to sleep, one or the other. Waj, you want me to keep going? You want me to keep going? Okay, I thought maybe you might want me. Yeah, I know that, but when you talked to me about this, you said about a break in between, so I didn't know if you wanted it or not. I'm rolling. Okay. All right, we're right back to this, fundamental skills, building blocks of offensive line play, and I forgot the right-in pass there. Okay. Now, the only thing I'll make, this is the same kind of deal that I gave you before, same kind of format. So if you've been awake, you're probably into it somewhat. The only thing I'll mention about the stance is in third down situations, we will use with our tackles a 2-point stance. I've done that with the guards. Did it with the guards in San Diego. Okay, did it with the guards when we were in Pittsburgh. But with what we do right now, it's better for our guards to be down because of some of the plays we run in a running game and so forth. If it's 3rd and 5, our tackles are going to be in a 3-point stance. If it's 3rd and 7, they're going to be in a 2-point stance. Okay, because we may run it occasionally, 3rd and 7 plus. But we may run it occasionally in that situation, but percentage-wise, Jimmy talks about 300 times, 2 times you ran the ball or you run a stunt. I mean, if we have, hope to hell we don't have 300 3rd and 7 pluses, but if we do, okay, 2 of those we may run the ball. So I'm gonna adapt the stance, again, efficiency-wise, to try to get them in a stance that correlates to what we're doing. Okay, we're going to throw the ball in that situation. So I'll put the tackles in a 2-point stance. It really doesn't change from where they started from, except they take their hand off the ground. Okay, other than that, it's the same stance, but I will let them use a 2-point stance. Okay, now, in terms of the teaching of the individual run blocks, the way I break it down is this. And what I did here, guys, I took the words that I used in the running game, approach, contact, and follow through, and I gave you what I call it in the passing game, but it's the same deal. Okay? I call it set and mirror. Okay? So when I talk to them about the running game, I say approach, contact, follow through, and finish. And when I'm talking to them about the passing game, I'm going to say set, mirror, punch, recovery. Those are their key words. Set, mirror, punch, recovery. Okay? Set and mirror are the same as approach in the running game. It's how the hell I'm going to get from where I'm at right now to get in front of this guy that I'm trying to block based on the depth and position of the quarterback. Now, quarterback, I'm going to speak primarily about the drop-back game, so he's going to be behind the center. But anytime we install a protection, I give my guys a depth and a launch point for the football because the angles are different based on where the quarterback is. Okay? So I will do that, but in terms of the approach in its simplest form, that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about set, mirror, set, mirror, set, mirror. Okay? The punch is the contact phase. Now, pass protection is short extension. It's not full extension. Okay? It's short extension. It's working in that position we talk about all the time. Our ass down, our knees in. You know, we talk about our knees inside. I refer to it as fundamental position. You'll see that throughout here. I talk about fundamental position. Okay, that's where the punch takes place from in its short extension. It's 3 to 6 inch extension. Okay, and then the recovery is, in essence, the follow-through. What do you do after you've set, you've punched the guy, now something's going to happen. How's he going to react, how are you going to react, and so on and so forth. Okay, so set, mirror, punch, recovery. Those are my key words. Now, let's look at just some of the sets that I teach. Okay, and this is my jargon again, and I learned a lot of this from Jimmy originally, and I've modified it over the years and so on and so forth, and he's past me, gone beyond me, come back a couple times, hit me going this way, and he's over there again at some point. But this is stuff that I got from him originally. Okay, they didn't even have this with Steelers when I went there. I couldn't believe it. Okay, as astute as I thought he was, they didn't have a set system per se. It used to drive me crazy. Okay, for me, a middle set, okay, happens 2 times. And you know, I'm not referring necessarily here to help and all that. I'm just talking about sets. Okay, a middle set will happen when I've got a frontal position on a guy. In other words, I'm shoe to shoe with that guy. Okay, I'm going to move this guy's in a right-handed stance. I'm going to move my set foot. Now, I use the same language he does, post foot, set foot. I'm going to move my set foot. Okay? If the guy is tight, okay, I got this guy. In other words, this guy is aligned. If I were the left guard and Bob Wiley right here were the right tackle on defense, my crotch would be splitting his crotch or vice versa. Okay, I've got half of this guy. Okay, on that guy, I will use a middle set. Again, I'm not taking into account help and this, that, and the other. I'm just teaching a system. Okay, the key word for me is half a man. Do I have half the man? If I have the half the man by alignment, I'm going to take a middle set. Okay? So that's the middle set. I will use that, as I said, on a frontal guy, or what tight outside is in parentheses. The guy's really outside, but he's not outside. He's tight outside. Okay, I have that half a man principle already taken into account for. Okay? I will use an inside set. An example here I gave was a right guard with a center going away. His help is going away. He's got a frontal guy on him. But there's a hole inside now with that guy going away. So I will use an inside set. Okay, I will move my post foot. Now I may just pick it up and move it 2 inches, but I'm going to make sure I got weight on it. I'm going to make sure I got weight on it for the same reason that in the running game on those double teams, I step with the inside foot in case I get quick inside movement. I want weight in there so I can flatten it and stop the penetration. Okay? I will maybe not obviously, but I will use it if the guy is removed from me half a man to the inside. And now it's got to be a little bit further. It's got to move to get to a frontal position. If you would, it's got to get to the same position as that. Okay, so I'll move it the full half a man. Again, I want to get frontal on the guy. Now, there's all kind of coaching points that I'm not going to be able to get into in terms of don't lean, this, that, and the other, but I'm just talking about the footwork right now in terms of the foot we set with and so on and so forth. Okay, an outside set. So I've had 2 sets. I've had a middle set, I've had an inside set. An outside set. Okay, I'm playing Tampa Bay. I'm the right guard. Okay, Warren Sapp's inside foot is right where Bob Wiley is right now. He's that wide. I certainly don't have half of him, and if I middle set him, I'm really on his edge. And they're going to blow his ass up the field, or they're going to run him into the tackle and run a TE game with him. So I'm going to set out and back and get to that half a man position. I'm going to get to that half a man position. I'm going to take an inside target on that guy, and again, that's not set, but I'm going to take an inside target on that guy. I'm going to hold the post foot as long as I can, but if that target goes that way a half an inch, I'm bringing the post foot with me. I'm bringing it back. I'm not bringing it laterally, I'm bringing it back. Okay? And I think, I have that a little later on here where I have the second step drawn in as well. But what I'm trying to get to there is the half a man position. Okay, the half a man position. When I tell them to use an outside set, and that can be a tackle on a 5 technique, a wide 5. Okay, when you play, again, Tampa, that's how wide they're going to be. Okay, I have a space set. Okay, I have 2 different things drawn up here. This is for a guard on a duel. Number 3. Square. Hold it back. Okay, space set. Okay, could happen for a guard on a duel. Okay, now it's a modification of the outside set, and really it becomes the outside set as the guy penetrates, if you're the guard, the B gap. Okay, I tell this guy on the duel as an example to set the outside guy and react to the inside guy. Eyeball the inside guy as you set. But the footwork is 1, 2, second step coming straight back. Kick back again, 3, and again 4, and again that same foot position that Mike turned of in terms of keeping a base, keeping fundamental position. Now, I'm going to use this over the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever I got left here, in terms of fundamental position. To me, fundamental position, again, is toes slightly out with my weight rolled over my insteps and my big toes. My knees inside. Okay, my ass down, my back straight, my head back, my hands in that position so I can short strike. That's fundamental position to me. Okay, when I talk to my guys about fundamental position, that's what I'm referring to. That is efficient in terms of moving, in terms of changing direction, that you have your weight in the middle all the time. From a physiological standpoint, that's the best position for those hands to be in, or for those the parts of your body to be in my opinion, in terms of balance. Okay, could happen for a tackle. Wide rush there, same thing. Kick out, straight back. Kick out, straight back. I'll talk a little bit more in a second about the vertical line and the intersect point. Okay, but that would be a space set. Those are the 4 sets that I work on. Okay, like I think I saw Chris's drill tape. He does something similar there. I work those 4 sets. Middle set, inside set. Outside set, space set. And that's how they apply to those particular things. Okay, in terms of the mirror part of it, set mirror. Okay, again, I've described fundamental position. This is where I was going to do it. But in terms of the fundamental position, I've already described that. We want to stay in fundamental position. We don't want to raise up. We don't want to lose a bend in our knees. If we're playing against a team that the guy's on us right away, we're probably going to really deep knee bend, bull rushers. And if guys are more finesse-y kind of guys, we won't bend quite as much, but the essential position doesn't change. Okay? So we want to stay in fundamental position, keep inside-out position. Now, again, I'm describing drop-back pass, quarterback behind the center, 5 to 7 steps deep, which puts him at 7.5 to 9.5 yards deep. That's what I'm describing. Okay? I'm not talking at all in any of this about short-setting guys or jumping guys. I'm just talking about, and those are all things I do, I teach, but I thought they were a little bit beyond the context of what I had time to get done here today. I'm talking about the fundamentals. Those are, that's pass protection 101 maybe. Okay, half the man. Okay, this is a key point for me with the middle 3, and the biggest problem I have when I take a tackle and make him a guard, okay, which everybody in our league does that because sometimes they can't play out there, and where they play then is inside. The biggest thing I talk to my middle 3 guys about is stretch and flatten defenders. Stretch and flatten defenders. Because if you go back to when you first learned football, some of us older guys, what they talk about is the centers and guards have the depth of the pocket and the tackles have the width. Okay, so you have to stretch everything on the inside. You can't work a guy on the edge. At tackle, you can. Because at a certain point, at tackle, you can do this, and that guy can't get to the quarterback. Based on the depth of the quarterback and where you've taken him on, where you're at, and so on and so forth. Don't where you're on, where you took him on, but where you're at. And the inside, that's not the, you got to flatten it. If you're a guard, you got to keep that 3 technique the hell off that tackle's hip. If it's an inside 1 technique, you better keep him off the center's hip, all things being equal. You got to flatten guys. Okay, I have some drills that I use, some of them are on that drill tape I brought in here. Okay, tackles. Let me see if I drew this. Yeah, I did. Okay. Tackles, I want to get to the intersect point on the vertical line. Now, I'm going to explain that concept on the next thing here for you. Okay, in terms of how I teach it. Okay. Let's look at this over here first. Okay. Q stands for quarterback. The right tackle is obviously the right tackle. That V over there is a rusher. Okay, one's supposed to simulate a 5-step drop, the other's supposed to simulate a 7-step drop. You can see the angle of the rusher is different based on where the quarterback is, and it would certainly change if his alignment changed. The angle would be different. Okay? I talked to my guys about keeping that kind of width for the tackle, and in order to do that, he's got to get to that inside-out, half-a-man relationship at the intersect point. Now, the intersect point is kind of it's not graphic. I mean, I'm trying to make it graphic, but it's not graphic. Because I haven't seen anybody yet that's been, it changes, I mean, because the angles always change. The issue is half the man. But you got to get to the intersect point in order to do that, and then you want to work to the vertical line. Now, I'll let my guys turn, or I let them turn. I try to get them not to turn. If this was a 5-step drop at 3.5 yards, they can get turned parallel to the sideline, run the guy beyond, and have him not get to the quarterback on the edge. On a 5-step drop, it's at 5 yards, or 7-step drop, it's at 5 yards. Okay? Now, I already mentioned in terms of the middle three. And what I did here to try to simulate this in terms of what I'm trying to get, okay, this guy on the right has got a guy, these are middle three people, obviously. That's a center in the middle. This guy on the right has got a guy who is working him outside primarily, and then he comes inside, and then he goes outside. It usually doesn't happen, obviously, but this is the concept. Okay, lose ground to the outside at a 45-degree angle. Grudgingly, if you would, but lose it at a 45-degree angle. Okay, and then this guy over here, I had this guy going inside on him to start with. Power step everything to the inside, flatten it out. Okay, so to the inside, you want to give up no penetration. To the outside, give it up grudgingly. Give it up grudgingly. Okay, and work the guy at a 45. Know where the threats of games are and all that sort of thing. I'm not into that right now. But again, I've already mentioned, if you got a 3 technique, you got to keep that guy off the tackle's hip. You got to keep him from blowing up the B gap first. If the center's going away from you, you better have knowledge that he's going away from you. And that gets into knowing where your help's at and all that sort of thing. Okay? But that's how I go through that, and that's the concept in terms of those particular things. Okay. If you don't get anything else from me in this whole damn lecture, just understand what I'm trying to say here about the punch. Okay? Tunch Ilkin played for me in Pittsburgh. I think he spoke here last year. I got him coming in again Monday. He was in with us last year. He's the best punch guy I've ever been around in my whole career. He's 262 pounds. You guys know the story if you're here last year. He's 262 pounds. He was in the Pro Bowl a 3 times. Played in the league for 13 years. Not because he was a big guy and massive and great athlete or anything else. He refined his technique. Okay? Now, Tunch Ilkin, the reason I'm saying this is, Tunch Ilkin never told me this. That's what the hell he did, but he never told me this. Chuck Noll told me that. The purpose of the punch, if you're sitting there in this position, and that guy has got a yard start on you, and he's running right at you, his force is going to be great. Just for the same reason when you come off and run block, you're trying to do this and chest the guy, your force is not where it needs to be. If you do this and that guy's running right at you, he's going to have more force than you have. So the purpose of the punch is to redirect that force. What you're trying to do, if you would, in its simplest terms, is to disseminate that force up through the top of his head. Okay, now that doesn't happen that often, but that's what you're trying to do. That's in essence what you're trying to do, is to redirect that guy's force. So you've got a chance to fight this battle. Okay, so that is the purpose of the punch. It's a 3 to 6 inch short extension, and I've already mentioned remaining in a fundamental position. Against bull guys, we're a little bit more heavy squat conscious. Okay, against finesse, over the arm, move guys, that sort of thing, speed rushers, we tend to play a little higher. Okay, in terms of the knee bend, because again, the extension from the knees is not the issue. The extension is from here. It's all from there. Okay. Okay, the recovery. I've already described the fundamental position, and this is why. Okay, your weight needs to be in the middle with your knees pressed in. Now, we don't do this in Detroit. The only place I've ever been when we did this was when I was with the Steelers. John Colwood played in the league for a lot of years, was our strength coach. When we did squats there, we did them in this position I'm talking about. Because Mike mentioned about the bench press. I think the bench press is the most overrated lift in football, period. I think the squat and the clean are way more appropriate because they simulate football actions. Okay? I know we all do this, but you play this game with your ass and your legs way more than you do that all the time. Okay? That's opinion. Okay? We would, in Pittsburgh, do our squats in that position with the knees in and the toes slightly out. Now, the weight guys don't particularly like it because it does put a lot of stress on the knees. It really does. But everything we did there, that's the way we did it. Our guys were as good as I've ever been around in terms of that part of it. Okay, we don't train it in the off season, is what I'm saying, as much as we did in Pittsburgh, but that's the fundamental position that I want them in. I want weight on their insteps and their big toes. I think I've already mentioned that. I want width in the base, no crossovers. Mike Tice, okay, he talked about the feet coming together. I call that heel clicking. We don't want their feet together. Don't heel click. Tackles will heel click on sets sometimes. You know, they'll sit out there and they'll bring this thing the whole way to there. Don't heel click. Keep a base, work from a base. Okay, and then the two actions that Jimmy has described over the years, obviously, kick, slide, and power step. I think that was originally Jerry Wamfer, was it not? I think that's where it came from originally. Jimmy refined it and popularized it. Okay, drills. We're back to drills. Back to drills. Okay, now this is just one thing, you know, you don't have to be real astute to figure out drills for sets. You just take sets in those different positions. Okay, this is a drill that this is one I got from Jimmy years ago, and I hadn't done it for a while, and I started to do it about 2 years ago, and it has to do with fundamental position and base again. Okay, if I've got a wide rusher on me, and I set that guy there, and he goes there, I can't do that. I've got to get back to the middle position, if you would, so I got to do that. So I do a fair amount of those. I choreograph those. On an inside set, it doesn't happen quite as frequently, but if I inside set and that guy goes outside and I do this, I'm doing that. Okay, so if I inside set that guy, I'm coming back to here so I can flatten that guy. Okay, so that's something that I would just, in other words, and I have it drawn up here, 1, back to middle, 3. Okay, this is off an outside set, 1, back to middle, 3. Power step to the inside. Okay, now, again, a lot of these particular drills, I'm going to go through this fairly fast, but a lot of these are on my drill tape that I brought in that was done there. These are some things that I do. I do a softball roll that I got from Hard Mud. I mentioned Hard Mud. I got this from him a number of years ago. I changed a couple things on this. Shit, I almost made it through, Bob. Is that all right? Okay. I do the softball drill. Where'd I go? Okay, I do the softball drill there. I usually use 3 balls. And I work as hard on this drill as they do. Now, on my drill tape, I got players doing it. They don't work one another as hard as I work them. I'll feed them a ball over there. They got to slide, shuffle, pick it up. I'll feed them a ball over here. They got to slide. I'll slide with them. I'll throw them another one over there. I'll drop one right in front of them. I'll bring them back over here. Okay, I make them work side to side, keeping that position. Now, the part that drives Jimmy crazy is because it's not a perfect drill, sometimes the ball gets beyond them. Okay, and I tell them to just get their ass back there as fast as they can get there and get in front of that ball. That involves a crossover. Okay, but I'm doing it because I want to keep the drill going. I want them to compete with me. And if they wind up over there, when they get there, I'll be there. So they feed me that ball, and now we go right back to the same drill and so forth. I did this with most of the guys we worked out on the road this year. I've done it with my guys for a couple of years. I think it's appropriate for what we've talked about in terms of base. I do this particular drill right here where I start a guy in a left-handed stance, send him there, have him flip his hips there. In other words, he's facing out there. He's facing in there. He'll get to this position right here. He flips his hips again. He's face out, so on and so forth. Again, that's on my drill tape. If you want to see it, it's on the drill tape that I brought in here. I do that with both guards and tackles. Okay, this drill is also on the drill tape. Okay, and you'll see it on the drill tape with a rabbit, which means there's a guy moving over there on defense. But I'll send the guy, I have the rabbit set wherever he wants to set. Like here, I have this guy take the appropriate set for where that guy is, and then he goes wherever he wants to go. And he will go to a cone here, back to a cone here, and then he'll just start back. Now, as an example, what I have it here is, I have this guy taking a middle set, and then going to there, coming back to this cone here with the rabbit. It's, the rabbit's just kind of moving to give him directions, and they're not competing. And then the rabbit will just lean back that way to tell him to go back that way. I'm working on weight in the middle. Okay, weight in the middle. Okay, fundamental position, etc. When this guy gets back to the middle, I have him go that way, and that is my cover drill. Okay, every time the ball's thrown downfield, I'm going to have him cover it. Okay, because again, I've already mentioned it. I mean, we got Herman Moore and Johnny Morton, and we have Barry Sanders. I mean, we got some guys, we get guys down there, okay, they got a chance to make long runs. So anytime that ball's thrown, I'm screaming, cover. Okay, and this is how I get that into this particular part of the drill. You'll see them on the tape doing that. I do a mirror dodge, primarily with the middle three guys, because I don't think, I did this with everybody in Pittsburgh, I think it's way more appropriate for the inside three guys. I got another one that I got from Howard that I'll show you that I do with the tackles. I do a mirror dodge with those guys. The rabbit moves, they take a set, as I have it drawn up here, they take a set according to where the alignment of that guy is, and then they move appropriately to the rabbit. This is competitive. The rabbit is trying to beat him to get an edge and to get inside there. Okay, the biggest problem with this drill, the biggest thing you'll find are guys wanting to do this. Okay, that's not what you want. You want them to flatten everything to the cone, even if it means pushing that guy beyond the cone at that point. And in terms of areaing games off and so forth, which we do zone games off most of the time, it's a great deal for that in terms of teaching it. Okay, now I do this drill a little different for the tackles. I got this from Howard again about 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's a really good drill. And what I do is, if this was the right tackle, he'd be in a right-handed stance. This would be a set foot. I do it on air first, just like I do the middle three up here, mirror. And I have this guy go to a point. I work it between these sidelines, or between the 5 and the 10-yard line, and these being the little marks on the sideline. This guy will only ever go to the fourth hash in terms of his shoulders, because I want him inside out. Okay, I want him inside out. And then I have him go there, he power steps back to there, and that is flat. And he carries the guy all the way to the line there. I start him off with his left foot on this line as I have it drawn right there. Then he will lose ground grudgingly again to the fourth hash mark, da-da-da-da-da, and so on and so forth. I do the same thing, and I put a rabbit over there. And I make them compete. I have the rabbit chop their hands, spin, do all those sorts of things. I do that in training camp. I do this most every day in training camp with the tackles. Okay. Let me stop. Let me keep going. I got just a few more things. Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. Punch drills. Okay, punch drills. I had some, after I had Tunch in there last year, I had some things built. These are like what I was trying to simulate. This is a base. Okay, and this is a crossbar, and these are wide, long, oblong bags. They're fairly hard. I also had bags put up in our weight room that are like this, on the walls, okay, in a place where they could get to them. And we will do punch drills, and if you've seen that tape and heard Tunch, it's all the same things in terms of the 10-second intervals, the high-low, the alternating quarters. I'll set the guys over here and have them punch as they go, similar to the one Mike had on there. And then one other thing that is not aligned with that particular machine, but one other thing that I will use is I use a machine gun drill. It's somewhat similar to the one Chris has on his drill tape, except I'll align 3 guys over there. I'll have this guy take a set according, it's a middle set because the guys are in the middle. And then this guy will go this way. He'll punch. He'll slide back to there, wherever that guy's at, and punch, and then redirect back to there and punch. And every once in a while, I'll have this guy jack him off and go over there. Okay, so he doesn't get in a rhythm of going back and forth. I call that machine gun. Okay, I do for the recovery part of it, I do what we call a braille drill. We have the offensive guy close his eyes, and have the rabbit lock up to him, walk into him tight. And the guy does all the movements that he does. This is, again, a middle 3 drill where he'll go back and forth here feeling the guy as opposed to seeing where he's going. Just feeling the guy. And I have this guy always end this with either a pull or a bull rush. The rabbit I'm talking about. Okay? 2 different ways I work on the bull. Okay, the hop back that Jimmy talked about this morning. That's this one right here where the guy's into the guy already. The offensive guy's a little bit upright. We'll push back, bend our knees. We hop back. Okay, and then I do this little drill. I got this. I never got this from Howard. I think that drill came from Howard originally. But I got this drill from Ray Roberts, who played for Howard in Seattle, and I think Howard must have done it. I have the tackle sometimes take a quick set and then just kind of chop their feet slightly and have a guy not too awful far from them in defensive position, but run right at them. So that they have to do that and sit down on the bull rush. I do that on occasion, and that's one I got from Ray. Okay, then I do the push-pull drill on occasion where I'll just have this guy pushing and pulling, this guy with his hands behind his back. Okay. All right, and finally, this is just, when I do one-on-one, there was one thing I wanted to mention here. When I do one-on-one against our defense, I don't ever set a guy on an island. Okay, I don't ever set one of my, pass protection's hard enough. And those guys will rush from here clear over there and say they got to the quarterback and hoot and holler and your guys feel like crap and all that sort of thing. So I always set the 2 adjacent guys. If the center's working, I set both guards. And if that defender runs out of his rush lane, normal rush lane, I just have him stick a hand on the guy so that he knows there's a presence there. And I've been doing that for a number of years. And what I was drawing up here for you was this would be one on this side, the guard and tackle would set. I'm working the tackle. Over here, I'm working this guard. I have both the center and the guard work. And I just tell them who's working. And they take their set accordingly. Okay, then we do the 2-on-2, 3-on-2 that everybody does. I work this 2 different ways. Okay, the 3-on-2 are what I call the three-man side. The defensive linemen hate it, okay, because they want to run their games against 2-man side all the time without the zone concept. But I'll do that, and I just stand on the other side and I tell the center which way to go. And I give them a snap count. And I'll do it on the 2-man side with the center going away. Okay, we do some half-line stuff. The Redskins used to run this years ago. We don't do this, but I thought it was really good. They would call a play in the huddle. Everybody would come to the line of scrimmage, and then the line coach, Joe, would tell them dead left. That meant the left guard and the left tackle weren't working. If you were on defense and the defensive lineman, okay, that meant you were dead as well. They took a knee. And whatever blitz they had called, they used to do this in training camp all the time, whatever blitz they had called, they ran. So if a Will linebacker ran through and there wasn't anybody to block him, he just, he pulled off the quarterback. But whatever games they had called and so on and so forth, they did. I thought it was a really good drill. And then obviously team is your final thing. Okay? What I try to do, guys, just try to take the things that I teach fundamentally and then show you some of the drills that I do for them. It's a lot of stuff in a short period of time. Hopefully there was something there for you. Appreciate your attention. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I'll be here like Mike said, and I'll be glad to talk to whomever. Thank you.